New Orleans meteorologist Bob Breck. Mr. Breck has dedicated over 30 years to the field of meteorology. Anyone familiar with his nightly newscast can easily see the enthusiasm and passion he has for predicting and studying the weather. Today he is here to tell you about one of the most controversial environmental issues of our time, global warming. He is not here to change your mind or make you believe one way or the other, but instead to give you his perspective and give you information to make you think and draw your own conclusions on the issue. Bob is truly a New Orleans celebrity and arguably the most trusted meteorologist in the Gulf Coast region. His visit today is certainly a treat for me, because when I was in 5th grade, I lived in St. Joseph's
10 years ago.
Just 5. I was at St. Joseph's Catholic School in Ponchatoula, Louisiana, and a meteorologist from Channel 8 came to talk to our school. But it was the other weatherman. This is like 92, I think his name is Breck. Anyway, I can remember being so disappointed that it wasn't Bob Breck. So 15 years later, I finally get to see Bob Breck come talk to my school.
Hi, gang. How y'all doing?
Good.
You know, if you talk right into this, it doesn't sound any better, so I'll just kind of talk back here. As long as you can hear me, that's okay. I'm out here not to change your minds. I'm out here just to present maybe another side that doesn't get presented on the news. I have been in the TV business since 1971. How many of you were born before then? Oh, there's someone else. Thank you. There's a couple. It's very kind of like humbling. You go into work, and I'm working with people now in our newsroom who, I mean, a lot of them weren't born when I started in broadcasting. A lot of them weren't born when I even started at Channel 8. I'm coming up on 30 years at Fox 8. It wasn't always Fox 8. At one time it was ABC. But a lot of young people are now in broadcasting. And I only point that out because there's something about having past histories that is really important when it comes to present-day goings-on. Whether it's the war in Iraq, for instance. If you weren't involved with Vietnam, like I was, then it's hard for you to understand some of the things that's happening now with Iraq. Having said that, let me tell you, I am fully supportive of our troops, but I also know that Vietnam divided this country. And this war is dividing this country. And I wish it would somehow be resolved so that we can once again be united and focused on the real problems that we have in the country that deal with things like Social Security, health care, you know, the whole spiel. I'm not a politician. I'm not running for office. I don't need your votes. But I'd like to get you to think about those kind of things. And that's why I'm here about, well, as Ryan mentioned, global warming. And the fact of the matter is, it's not global warming, it's climate change. That's what it is. It's climate change. And I kind of wrote down a couple notes because I didn't want to forget. When you get to my age, you know, and you've been drinking for almost 60 years now, a lot of your brain cells are gone, so your memory is not what it used to be. So the title of my talk was Global Warming, the Hype, the Myths, and the Real Truth. And if you watch any of the media, you only get one side. And if you don't want to dive down into the nitty-gritty, the one side is pretty convincing. And you're going to come away saying, damn, we're screwing up this planet. Man is bad. I'm going to do something about it. I'm going to help change the climate. Well, the fact of the matter is, the hype is, the climate is changing. Man is the cause. The truth, as I see it and many others, is that the Earth's climate has always been changing. In my lifetime, way before it, and way beyond it, it will always be changing. That's the way the planet operates. Has man changed it in some small ways? Absolutely. No question about it. You've heard about what they're doing to the rainforest. The deforestation is going to make some small climate changes. The urbanization. Years ago, when, well, even in the 30 years that I've been here, many of the cities, like Atlanta, Dallas, Houston, have expanded tremendously. And you would be foolish to say that's not affecting the local climate around those cities. We know those things are fact. Man is changing the climate in some small instances. But man is not the driver of climate change, as a lot of the media want you to believe. Al Gore said, "The earth has a fever, and it has never been this warm before." Well, the reality is it's been much warmer in past climates. Did you all know that? They told you it's never been this warm. Now, when I say past climates, do we have to go back too far? Uh-uh. You have to go back more than before I was born, that's for sure, but not that much farther. It actually was warmer in the 1930s in the United States than it is now. Y'all heard about the big Dust Bowl era and the farms that were wiped out because of drought. Remember all the predictions now, because of global warming, we're going to have worse droughts and more floods. Don't you think that happened before? Absolutely. The myth. CO2 is the driver of climate change. How many of you believe that? No, most of you should, because that's what they say. CO2! Greenhouse gas! Who here knows, by volume, what is the biggest greenhouse gas?
Water vapor.
You are correct, sir. Water vapor. It's like 96%. You want to take a guess what CO2, what minute amount CO2 is? Less than 1%. You know, there's another gas out there called methane. You know, methane. Something that it's not just man. It comes from cows and all this other stuff and, you know, manure. And that's a more factor than CO2, but you never hear anything but CO2. I've got some slides to show you how these things match up. I'm just throwing out some facts as to some of the things I want you to think about. The thing that was on the news the other day, in fact, this was on one of the blogs, and I, like if you're a weather geek, you go on some of these blogs. At my university, no less, the University of Michigan, suck of a football team. You don't know how that hurts me. But one of our professors up there is a guy named Jeff Masters, and he came on talking about the ice caps. And not only that, the ice cap over the Arctic Ocean is going to be gone by the year 2030. You know what, Jeff? You ought to go back farther and see, because he says that like it's never happened before. It has happened before. And they're trying to make everything a crisis. You know what the real crisis in the world is? Poverty. Hunger. Not that, you know, the future's not important, but if you can't live for now, what do you care about the future? So should we be channeling all of our focus into trying to stop something we can't stop anyway, and spend billions and billions and billions of dollars when you have problems out there that could be solved? Hey, again, I told you, I'm not running for office. Let me try and get through. I'm not, by the way, a gifted. I don't have one of these. I've got computers, but let's see what happens here if I hit the right one. We start with Al Gore. How many of you have seen Al's movie? Very slick. I mean, very slick. Pretty convincing, I would say. Very slick. Now, if you were a scientist or anybody with some science knowledge, you'd pick up some things that just weren't right. Let's see what Al's scorecard is. He says, we are in the warmest in 1,000 years. Well, that's not right. If you go back, we're as warm as we were in the 30s and 40s, as I've already said. Al said sea levels will rise 18 to 20 feet. The IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, this is the authority is only predicting 8 to 18 inches at most. What happened there? It's a basic rule of journalism. Never let facts get in the way of a good story, even if they're wrong. Well, you can read all the other stuff. Mount Kilimanjaro, they show this picture a lot that, hey, the glacier is disappearing because of the warming. The fact is, it's actually colder in the past 25 years. The glacier's going away because there's been a shift in the rainfall. And what does that mean? Well, at that elevation it comes down as snow, and when you don't have as much snowfall, that's why it's disappearing. You haven't heard that. You only hear the other side. Greenland! The ice on Greenland is vanishing. Will disappear. Yeah. Well, you know what? Why did they name it Greenland? Well, could it be in the past it might have been green? At one time, in some of the northern latitudes of Europe, there were vineyards. There were vineyards in northern Europe. That they can't do that anymore because it's too cold. Well, now it's starting to warm back up again. Maybe they can start doing vineyards again. My point being, what's going on has happened before. But you never hear that in the news. And almost every day, there is a global warming story. Am I here to change your mind? I'm here to get you to think. How about the polar bears and the poor penguins? Oh my, they're making these movies on these guys. The polar bears. Well, the World Wildlife Federation says there are 20 populations of polar bears. Yeah, 2 are diminishing. But all others seem to be either stable or increasing. All right, let's get to this greenhouse gas. I've already mentioned it. Thank you for telling me about the water vapor, the H2O. That is the main player. The greenhouse gas is going up. No question about that. The thing about measuring CO2, it's been measured where they get this chart. It's on top of a mountain and in Hawaii. I'll let you read all that up there. The bottom line is that these scientists, and I don't want to accuse, but I'll just say, when you get your funding, or where you get your funding, shouldn't matter. But it does. Who funds these scientists? The National Science Foundation. Okay? Now, the National Science Foundation sounds like, yeah, that's no political society at all. But think about it. If you're a professor, at LSU, for instance, you know, and maybe your professors will tell you here, they don't make most of their money teaching. They make most of their money in research or in talks. And they go out and do speaking circuit things. Same with doctors. A lot of doctors make their money by going out and speaking. Well, the ones that make their money, a lot of it in research, well, guess what? If they don't have a crisis to propose, they're not going to get research funding. Now, some scientists came out and said, the globe isn't warming. You think he's going to get any funding? No, he won't get any funding. It's the ones that are making this a crisis that we have. I think the window they tell us is 10 years now. If we don't reverse this, we're doomed. The atmosphere will tilt because of where they get their funding. That is a problem. They accuse anyone like me who is saying, now wait a minute, guys, we may not totally agree here. If you disagree with them, somehow you must be connected to big oil. I wish I were. I wish Exxon, Mobil, BP, somebody. I'll go speak for them, but I get no money from them. The guy who put this slideshow together, Dr. Joe DeLeo, he's not into big oil. But that's what they want you. In fact, what they do, and there's a lot to these slides, so let me get to the ones that I want to get into. They tend to make curves up, is what these slides are telling you, and I don't want to. I want to get into some of the things about carbon dioxide, here it is here about the volume of carbon dioxide, what it is. And it's a very small part of the atmosphere. And one of the lines here that I thought was interesting, it's halfway down. If the atmosphere was a 100-story building, the CO contribution today would be equivalent to linoleum on the first floor. That's how minor it is. Yet they want you to believe it's the driver of climate change. So, let's see. It's going up. He spent a lot of time talking about the CO2 effect. And hey, I'm not here to say CO2's going down or anything. I'm just here saying, yeah, it's going up, but I just don't believe that it's the driver of climate change. Also, he talks about CO2 is, there's a lag to the effects of CO2 in that it's gone up a lot in the last 10 years, but there's a lag effect. And so that the warming is not going to ramp up because CO2's ramped up. He mentions about the methane being more of a much stronger greenhouse gas than CO2. And I must tell you, this guy is a brilliant fellow. He started with John Coleman, the Weather Channel in Atlanta. Most of you, if you're not familiar, the Weather Channel is a national cable channel. The first one that came on that said there were enough people interested in weather we could put on a cable channel, kind of like the Golf Channel. It's a small minority of folks like me that like to watch that stuff, but that's where this guy gets his background. He's just really a brilliant guy. Anyway, let me get on to some of the stuff these are a lot of slides. You can tell he presented this slide, by the way, to a group of scientists. He's in the minority. He's in the minority. So you never hear any of this. And it's very difficult for people who have opposing views to be heard. We're either called skeptics, deniers, soothsayers, or worse. And the thing about it is, all of the people who are saying that they're in the consensus are into what's called climate modeling. That's the group of scientists that talk about climate modeling. This slide talks about, it's a historical record about the changes that happen in nature. And way years ago, as they call it, the Viking era, and that goes back to 1100 some, it was much warmer. Here you see the warming in our modern era over on the right side of the screen. You see the cooling that happened in the 1600s and 1700s. It was much warmer back then than it is now. But you're never going to hear any of that. And then this goes into that. So there's a bunch of slides that talk about it. If you're interested in this stuff, I can get you all this stuff. Here's one that to me is more, it just jumps out at you. The Earth is warmer. We're not disagreeing with that. But there's a problem there. The data set has changed. Years ago, there were over 6,000 stations worldwide. It's now down to 2,000. Wow. A third less stations measuring temperature. Now, where do you think all of those other 4,000 stations were? You think they were in the big city areas? No. They were in rural areas because not many people out there. What do we care what it is? Okay, so they kept most of the city reports, which I've already told you, because of urbanization, are going to be hotter. It's going to present a warmer bias. We've lost the rural stations. And they tell you they've made adjustment, but according to many of the people that I pal around with, and I'm talking about people that you might have heard about, like the directors of the National Hurricane Center and people that deal with hurricanes, none of them buy into this theory that is going on. The station dropout is a big factor because when you see what happened when the stations dropped out, look what happened to the temperature. All of the warmer temperatures happened after that. That's a problem to me. In Russia, it's not like us. They even have a greater problem over there. In many stations just miss data. They're not there at all. So anyway, you see, there's another thing I want you to think about. Talked about the urban heat island already, so we'll get right up on it. The siting issues. What the heck is that? The siting issues. Well, it's like at Channel 8 we have a rain gauge, an anemometer, a thermometer. The siting is, where do you place those so that the building doesn't influence those readings? And it's very critical. Here's a couple of examples. And these are these are registered thermometers that are in this network that's telling you the Earth is warming up. If you look at the one over here on the top left side, it's next to a parking lot. It's supposed to be over grass, but it's right next to a parking lot. I got to show you another one here. There's one here that is, maybe he doesn't have it. It's right over a barbecue pit and a chimney. There it is. There it is. Look at this one. There's a chimney off to the left, and there on the ground is a barbecue pit. You never hear this stuff. Oh my goodness! Look at this. One by a tennis court. Y'all know that black bodies heat up faster than, well. That's what we're facing. Those of us who are skeptics, there's more examples. I mean, you can't get readings that are reliable when the siting sites are contaminated. They're not good. And you look at these and you say, my goodness, I'm going to start thinking about what they're telling me here. I just don't want you to buy into everything they're saying, because what's going to happen is they're going, and I'm afraid the train has already left the station. They will force Congress to pass laws that will affect my life and your life and everybody's life for something that we can't stop, we can't change. Because the climate has always been changing, and it will keep changing, even if they tell you that we're going to keep warming up forever. There's no record in the past that has shown that, and there's just nothing in the future that shows that. All right, here we go. What we believe, those of us who disagree, is that there is a sunspot cycle, and that the graphs of what goes on with the sunspots identify much better with the warming and cooling of the planet than the CO2. Some of these are, let me try and advance to where I need to go, because I'm running a little long. Here's an example of the top warming years. You see, the top 20 warmest years, the 1900s, the 80s, 90s, and 2000, plenty warm. But look back, 1930, still the top that way. There wasn't global warming back then. So it appears that we're just not getting all the facts. I'm going to get through some of this stuff because I want you guys to have a little time to talk to me. There's a sunspot cycle. You all know about a sunspot cycle. When that sunspot cycle goes on, years ago they used to tell us the solar constant. The output from the sun was constant. We now know that not to be true. So that's just another thing that you need to kind of think about. The sunspot cycle is much better correlating to the warming than the CO2. I'm going to pass through a lot of this stuff because this could go on. I could talk about this stuff for a day and a half. And it goes back way onto other things. Did you know that if man was creating global warming, how could we be doing it on other planets? How about that? They're talking about Neptune has warmed, one of the moons, and other planets have had global warming. Well, how do you? They don't have men or women. What's going on there? Could it be the sun? They don't want to admit these things. Cyclical ocean currents, documented. But they're trying to tell us, nah, it's more just CO2. So, let's see if I can get down to some of there's a lot of graphs in this thing. And forgive me for showing so much of this. There's the Pacific Decadal Oscillation, same thing in the Atlantic, El Niños, La Niñas, there's a lot that is into climate change. It's just not CO2. What about the ice caps and glaciers? Well, we already told you that that happens. It happens in the past. It'll happen again in the future. It's not that this has never happened before. Here's Mount Kilimanjaro, and you look at it and say, my goodness, there's not much snow left on top of that. But it's not because that it is warming on top of the mountain. Temperatures have cooled. It's just that the precipitation has changed. So that does make a difference. And there's stuff in here about Greenland, the Arctic. It's a well thought out lecture. But this is what you see. The polar bears. He didn't make this guy's name up. Joe started this with AccuWeather. But no, there's just, they want you to believe that we are killing animals. And that's just, you know, and I don't mean any derogatory thing here. But, you know, when climate has changed in the past, you know what? Some animals haven't adapted. Do you remember the dinosaurs? They didn't adapt, did they? And they were big animals. So, yeah, you know, with climate change, there's going to be, this is just telling you that some of our bigger snowfalls now happened in the past couple of years. Of course, now the climate people are going to tell you, that's what we predicted. More snows, more rain. They can't be wrong. They can't be wrong. The reason this guy focuses on New England is because that's where he lives. So, at any rate, let's see if I can, I can't back it up. All right. Uh-oh. Ryan, I might hit the wrong button.
I just click on it, she goes away.
Okay. Consensus on global warming. How do I get that away?
If you want to go back, all you have to do is just go up to previous and click on previous.
You want me to try that? That?
Just
And,
click
and
one.
click it? Here's what I was telling you. They call us denialists. Now, that is a negative term. Makes me feel like, my goodness, I've accepted something under the table. What they don't tell you is that James Hansen has been handsomely rewarded from the people like the Heinz Foundation. Where have I heard that name? One of the candidates married to one of those? You betcha. So it's like, it's almost going to where that old thing of don't call the kettle, whatever that saying was. Nobody is making this up because of money. There is a real concern that some of the facts are being skewed. There is a consensus among environmentalists, climate modeling scientists, and researchers. There is a consensus in that group. They're benefiting from government and foundation grants to study global warming. As it says there, absolutely. I've already told you that. The journalists, well, like my station, they just buy into whatever they're told. Very few will dig and get the facts. The other people, though, geologists, physicists, and people that study the suns and the solar system, don't buy into it. They don't buy into it. And more importantly, the climatologists around the country don't buy into it. But you never hear that. All you hear about is skepticism. And now they even say it's the older scientists. Well, you know why? When I was in school back in 1960 or something, at the University of Michigan, one of the big pushes on what they were studying was global cooling. And in fact, Time magazine came out, and this is not the picture up there because that's 1945. But I'm talking about earlier in 1971. I think it was Newsweek, not Time. Their wording said, there is now a consensus of scientists who believe that the Earth is cooling. Have you heard that word before? Consensus of scientists. Now, when you say, how could so many have been so wrong? They tell us, oh yeah, but now the science is much better. We have much better instrumentation. We know now what those guys didn't know back then. What did I just show you? The instrumentation, the electronics may be better, but so much of the citing and the lack of data is not any better. So, I'll let you read what. Anyway, the point that I'm going to leave you with today is that it's just not CO2. And we should be focused on other things. We could maybe even start to see cooling in the next 10 years or so. What's going to happen then? After all these laws have been put into effect and the earth starts to cool. Well, you know what? They'll say, you see, it's working, it's working. It's not working because it never had to work. The climate will adapt and change itself. It's almost the arrogance of man to say that we somehow can change the climate of the planet. We can affect it to a small degree, but not to the degree that they're trying to get you to think about. So I end with this scorecard. You make your decision. I haven't made my decision. I'm still looking. I'm searching for the truth. Not the inconvenient truth. I'm searching for the real truth. My mind is not closed. I'm having a battle with this national society I belong to, the American Meteorological Society, because they've already put out their stance. They are backing this global warming thing, bada boom. And those of us who disagree, some of the people say we should be disbarred. Oh, that's a legal term. Decertified. So that's what we face. I think it's all going to come down in the next few years to hopefully some common sense. Now, those of you who are strongly on one side or another, got a chance to take a shot at me, because I don't have all the answers. I'm not a climate scientist. I'm just going by looking at this from a totally operational standpoint. I'm not a researcher. I forecast real-time weather, which is a lot different than what the climate guys do. Yes?
Just one point. The BBC put out an excellent documentary. It's called the Global Warming Swindle. It basically
I did see that. That was excellent.
It's excellent. So if any guys want to look that up, it goes hand in hand with what he's saying about sunspots and stuff. I think one thing that you're talking about, though, with laws and CO2 output, you know, I mean, most of the sources that we're looking to for these massive amounts of CO2 output, cars, coal, factory plants, you know, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to reduce those outputs, considering how much pollution and I mean, there's so many other things with smog and
Absolutely.
And just industrialism in general. So, you know, I don't think it's the worst thing to enact laws that would require developed countries to, you know, mitigate their CO2 outputs.
I totally agree.
Yeah.
Can I tell you what the problem with that is?
Sure.
Have you heard now, you know, you can buy carbon credits.
Right.
No, either we do this or we don't. You know, I grew up in Hammond, Indiana. I worked in the steel mills up there, and it was nasty. The pollution just was terrible. Finally, they came out with laws. You got to have scrubbers, and sure, we should be cleaning up the atmosphere. I totally agree with you there. But I think we ought to do it in a way that's different than the way the politicians want it done. You see how the government operates? They want to tax you. They want to tax you. Now, that may not be a big deal to you now, because you're not the Morris Barts of this world that have $1 zillion coming in. But once you start making real money, you're going to say, what is this? I'm making, you know, when I was making $30,000, it wasn't bad, but now that I'm making 100, it's like I'm making 30, because I never see it. The more you make, the more they take. They need to make incentives. Give you an example. You know about the light bulbs. You can all get these nice, not the, whatever they call them, the kind that use much less energy, but they cost more. Why can't they work out an agreement to say, you know, if you use less energy, you can write off, and there's an easy way. I mean, you got your power company stuff. You can write off $100 savings on your tax bill. Give me an incentive to do that. That's what I mean. The idea, remember when the Prius came out, and they gave you tax incentives to buy a more expensive car that was more planet friendly. Absolutely. We need to do those things. And please don't take me that I am against trying to, somehow let the oil companies keep polluting, because I'm not. They make enough money that they can afford to clean the planet up. They should be cleaning up Louisiana and what they did to the marsh. I can't understand that. Why don't we go back and get some kind of fund from Shell and all the companies that put all the canals in our marsh, and it's hurt us? I don't know. But I think we need to do it in a way, instead of taxing, we need to make it incentives, and that, to me, makes more sense. Yes?
Isn't the problem with carbon output not so much from the already developed nations, but from the developing ones like China and India especially, the ones that kind of just do all the...
That's why we did not agree to the Kyoto Agreement, because it excluded some of the developing countries. And here's the thing that most people don't understand. If we force these developing countries who are trying to get out of poverty, if we force and put these curbs on them, it's going to hurt the very people that you want to help. It's what I told you before. If you're trying to survive day to day, just getting enough food, what do you care about the future? Tomorrow may never come. You're trying to survive for today, and then they're going to put and eliminate maybe some other things in your life. I don't think they're going to be happy about that. Yes?
Well, the global warming swindles on Walter Williams' website. If anyone wants to check into that, it's great. But this past year, they said that we've had the coldest months in over 100 years in America. Michigan had temperatures in the negative 20s. The second thing is, if America would have signed the Kyoto Agreement, we would have supposedly unemployment, because these industries would have been just devastated, of like 30 to 35%, while people like Al Gore and Leonardo DiCaprio fly around in their jets by themselves and tell us to take the bus. And you hear these reports where Sweden wants to control the moose population because of CO2 output. I mean, it's getting nuts. I mean, actually, the scientists in Canada are pleading to the Prime Minister of Canada to completely take Canada out of Kyoto because they consider it junk science. It's causing more harm to the ozone layer now than they thought before. There's this, almost like this, recently this revolution of scientists who are suing to get off these reports, that they put little snippets in, and it's just, like you said, it's these yellow journalists that are creating this stuff. It would destroy, it would destroy a capitalistic economy, and it would destroy progress.
I could tell you, this is a fairly conservative group, I think, is it not?
I'm sorry?
That's Al Gore's goal.
Well,
They're self-hating, they're
In
capitalist
France,
hating.
Mitterrand, the president of France, said this Kyoto's great because it's a great equalizer.
That's what
That's what he said. He was heard quoting saying that.
Well, I'm not trying that. You obviously have your opinions. I didn't even almost have to go through all this then. I could have just said, hey gang, we're on the same page. But, you see what's happening, this political force in Washington is so strong, and it's gone through Hollywood, because you see all these movies. These movies don't get done by the little people. They're done by the rich, the very rich. And to get a movie like Al Gore did, and then he's on every talk show and Oprah and you name it, there's an agenda there. And I really think most of America does see that. But the problem is the people that we elect in Congress that are going to vote on those kind of changes, they need to know how you feel. And the only way they know is if you communicate with them. It's so much easier now because you can email. You need to, whoever's in your district that represents you, you need to let them know, hey, this global warming stuff, please, before you vote, get educated on it. Because there's a lot more than what's been put out there. I missed this side. Anybody? Yes.
After what Derb said, Al Gore, I went and saw him at Tulane when he was here. I don't know if anybody here got the opportunity to go, but he was here last semester. And so I went over there. He presented his PowerPoint just like he does in the movie. And, he talks about it's not a political matter. And I just, the hypocrisy of him standing up there and telling us it's not a political matter when you have all of these bills in Congress, and it's in the media every day, and it's just it's everywhere, and it's absolutely a political matter. And the reason that he has so much sway is he is a very eloquent speaker. He's very good. It's very easy to sit there and watch him and think, okay, I could believe him. But people ask him questions and he dodges them. When I noticed that when I was at Tulane, and he has no answers beyond his PowerPoint. When people try to say, well, hey, couldn't it be this, couldn't it be that, he has no response.
Well, it should send up a signal anytime you see the leading spokesman for a cause is a politician. That should send up a signal right there. I can almost buy like a DiCaprio getting involved. Now, he's not asking for our votes, so that's not as bad. But somebody like an Al Gore, who I truly believe is going to try and run for president again this year. I think that's why this has all come about with Al Gore. He really thinks they're going to be deadlocked. They'll come back to him, and he'll be their candidate again. That's just my opinion. Don't write it and put it somewhere. Because what do I know? I'm not a Clancy Dubose, and I stay out of politics.
Just
Yes.
one last thing. There's been a bunch of, in the last, 9 months, there have been a lot of articles in New York Times, New York Post, especially New York Times, that have basically picked this movie to shreds. It's like, they focus on Mount Kilimanjaro, they focus on other things, and saying, they quote other scientists as saying, look, we're not Republicans, but this guy doesn't know what he's talking about. And I was surprised to see that, like 4 or 5 different articles in the New York Times. It's not like, we want to see pollution or anything, but we need CO2 for an atmosphere, and that way you can't live on Mars and places like that because there is no CO2.
Well, yeah, but we're throwing too much CO2. I agree. We need to cut back this CO2 thing because it's really taken off, and we should, as a fellow pointed out, we shouldn't be polluting the planet the way we do. But you have to be very careful. The push now, what? Ethanol. Let's burn ethanol instead of gasoline. Well, there's another thing that comes out of ethanol that could harm ozone. So, geez, we better think before we do these things. What bothers me is the only clean, absolutely clean burning energy is what?
Nuclear.
Nuclear. And so what? They won't let us build any more nuclear plants. They say, can't do it because they're too dangerous. I think we got a dilemma. Sometimes you have to accept risk. You have to accept some risk, but I think the risks are so small, the benefits far outweigh it. We could get rid of all these coal-fired plants, but that won't happen in my lifetime.
Just one more point to kind of wrap up your ethanol thing. Ethanol is the worst idea ever, so any of you that think that's good, that's really bad. But to kind of help strengthen your point, ethanol is obviously from corn or sugarcane. So, with your problem with poverty and hunger more so, using the world's freshwater resources and soil and food is definitely not the way to go to keep powering our cars or whatever it may be. So do some research on that if you need to. Anyone?
No, I already know that's not the way to go. Anybody over here that I missed?
Yes. What then those hurricane cycles? They seem that people talk about them being more intense. The bigger hurricanes, there are more coming. What is the driver of that? Is that a totally different system? Is it?
Well, there are those researchers like Carrie Emanuel at MIT who say that because of global warming, that the oceans have warmed up and there's going to be more frequent and more severe hurricanes. Well, if you know Dr. Gray, who studied this probably long before Carrie Emanuel was born, he knew that we were going into a more active cycle. I've been seeing this man since, I've been going to those hurricane things since the 70s. And he came out in the late 80s saying that we are on borrowed time. Had nothing to do with global warming, by the way. He just said, he presented these cycles, these ocean cycles that happen. And what happened in the 20s, 30s, and 40s when we had all these big bad hurricanes. And that cycle went away, things quieted down, and people that lived along the oceans forgot about hurricanes. They said, well, let's build some houses along the beaches. And before you know it, then you have the condos going up. Well, the cycle, he predicted, would start again in the 90s. And it did in 1995. The cycle's gone 12 years now. He says they usually go 20 to 30 years, meaning that we still got quite a while in this active cycle. Now, the I carry manual wants you to believe, because of global warming, that we're going to have these bad storms from here on out. It's going to always be there. History shows us to be otherwise. But if you dare disagree with these people, shame on you. You know, you, for some reason, have no brain. I'm a PhD and I know better. That's what he'll tell you. Now, what's my feeling? I like to think, you know, you saw 2 Category 5s this year. Is that unusual? Absolutely. But what are we in? We're in this current warming cycle. So the oceans are warmer than they were a couple of years back, say 20, 30 years ago. So we should be seeing these bigger storms now. Dr. Gray, and I had a talk with him, said maybe as soon as 5 to 10 years the cooling cycle kicks in. So that's what happens with our planet. Now those folks who are on one side don't want you to believe in cycles. There's many of us that do. Who's right? Who's wrong? They say, well, let's err on this. You know, if we're right, my goodness, and we can't reverse this climate change, there's nothing that's showing that in past history. So as I say, is it better to spend billions and billions of dollars on something that you don't know will work, or rather spend it on stuff that you know will work? And I think they got the wrong prices. It's not the warming of the planet. It's the starving of the planet that they should be addressing.
I have just a quick practical question. You hear every season that the various weather people predict how many hurricanes will occur that year. I was wondering how they make those predictions. How is it that how do they determine there'll be this many Category 5 hurricanes this year?
Well, again, they're researchers. I'm not. I'm the lowly forecaster, and I just try and forecast day to day, week to week. They like to come out many months in advance. So they go back and they look at what they call the predictors out in where the oceans, where the storms form. There's a number of them, like 6 or 7, that they look at. And they've determined that there's some correlation between those predictors and the number of storms. What the whole big thing about that I get upset about is it's like real estate. What's the most important predictor?
Location.
In hurricanes, what's the most important predictor? Location. They can't tell you location. Now, the one figure I heard is there's a 78% chance of a hurricane crossing the U.S. coastline. We've got about 3 weeks to go, maybe a little longer. If we can get through mid-October, it's almost guaranteed this will mark the 2nd straight year that we won't have a hurricane crossing the U.S. coastline. So they come out with all these predictions, frighten everybody, and it's like what I said here. It's the hype that they try and scare people. In a community like us that's so fragile, we don't need that. We don't need that. So I came out with a prediction. I said, if they can predict every year, let me come out. I'm telling you right now, I have no skill in predicting this. Here's the reasons I came up with the number of storms. The previous most active year, 1933, had 21 storms. 1934 had 11. 1935 had 6. Could it be the planet is trying to correct itself from all the goofiness it went through? Maybe. So I said, if we had 28 in 2005, last year we had 10. Okay, well, the year after, we should have less. I said we have 9. Totally on a historical perspective. Now, a true scientist would say, you can't do that. I know I can't do that, but the idea is, I don't think they can do what they're doing. Because what they're doing has not shown a lot of skill. Boy, you've been a great group. You know a lot about this global warming thing that I'm impressed. Usually when I go talk about these things, it's like, duh. they just have no clue in what they hear in the press, they believe. So it's like, I am encouraged that there are people that have or share some of my views, but again, you've got to get involved with politics. You're going to be lawyers, for God's sakes. If you got to let your representatives know how you feel. And again, you're not demanding anything from them except for them to educate themselves on this. And just don't go by what they're getting from the media, because the media is so on one side of this that I think in the long run it will hurt the country.
We want to hear on the news tomorrow that you were at Loyola Law School and those law students were so bright.
What do I call this group?
Federalist Society.
Oh, that sounds like, you know. Federalist Society.
We'll show you the secret handshake later.
Talented 10th.
Okay, when do you want me to say hello? Tonight on 5, 5:30, or 9?
Give us the secret hand.
9 o'clock. 9 o'clock, I didn't remember all that. Federalist Society, Loyola Law School. We'll say hello. We got a prop. I got a call. Thank you.